Now that we saw how things are done with a mix of technical drawing and freehand drawing, let's see how we can get the same results doing it using only freehand technique. We did some complex geometry before in freehand, but let's see if we could get some good results with more complex props using it. We already drew this one before, using the technical drawing in the previous lesson. Let's now try eye-sighting. We're gonna start again with the bounding box, but this time it's done in freehand, without any horizon line or vanishing points. This is basically done using fanning to set the tone and perspective for the rest of the drawing. After drawing the box, we can now start with the base platform moving along the same angles of the bounding box. Next, I start drawing the wheels right away without the bounding box for them, just ellipses that follow the same angle of the bounding box. Once I finish the first wheel, I can copy it to the back, knowing that it will get shorter and smaller as it goes back in perspective. I set it in the right place and adjust its angle for that position. Now I draw the back side of the platform along with the bounding box for the cabin in the back. Again, the lines have to be parallel to each other as you draw them, or things gonna look very wrong right away, especially in tiny spaces like we see here. But if your object is big and going all the way from the ground toward the sky, then sure, you can start fanning the lines a bit more. But as we are dealing with a tiny toy, lines can be more parallel to each other. Next, I draw the bounding box for the front cylinder as well, just so I can get the overall shape for the whole vehicle. After making sure all the lines align with each other, I lower the height a little bit for the whole vehicle. Next, I draw the cylinder for the body inside the bounding box by roughly drawing the start and the end ellipses and connecting in between them. It looks a bit rough now, but I can always refine it at the end of the drawing. I add the chimney on top with the other cylinder, making sure that the height is correct and the space in between the two is correct as well, using negative shapes and angle and measurements from the early lessons of drawing we talked about. Now I draw the cabin and rotate the canvas to make sure I get the smooth angle correctly. The vehicle is starting to look like the reference photo. All I need to do now is to add the final details like the other wheel, using the front wheel as a guide, and add the details in the front. Let's refine the lines a little bit more around the sketch. Okay, now that the main shape is done, let's add the refined line weight as a last step. I can still use more time to refine the lines further and redraw it in careful lines, but we kinda get the final shape of the train that is very close to the reference photo. Just for a little comparison, this took around 25 to 30 minutes in technical drawing. Here it took about 10 minutes to do the whole thing. While it's not as accurate as the technical drawing one, but you get to the idea much faster, especially if you are in the design phase of this object. Once you finish sketching the idea, you can always take your time and clean up the lines after. Let's now do more complicated shapes, like this chess piece for example. We first draw the bounding box again, taking hints of the chessboard underneath it to get the angle and the perspective right. Next, I start with the profile shape of the piece from one side and rotate it around to the other side, drawing the inner ellipse as I go along. Moving my way up, I tried to mirror all the lines to the other side and finally draw the top cylinder. Still not worrying about details just yet. I'm only focused on getting the main shape right first. Once I got the general shape down, I start adding the details for the joints on top by drawing the inner circles guidelines for the start and the end of the holes so they all align on the same ellipse. Once I finish up the major shapes, it's time to clean things up and adjust the final pieces around. Finally, I add the outline for the whole thing and clean up the sketch for the final output. And here it is. Even though it was all smooth and ellipse heavy, it was simply done using freehand for getting the main angles correct. The first part is always the hardest, but once you get the main shape correct, details are the easiest part to add afterward. Let's get to the top tier of prop drawing, an actual in-game prop. This is a sci-fi futuristic machine for ATM for a game. So let's see if we can copy it in a correct perspective using freehand. Starting this time without even the bounding box. Doing it all mentally and drawing the lines in a correct perspective right away. Even if the perspective we draw it in doesn't match the reference photo, the important part here is to get the shape and the ratios of it right. Now the original perspective seems to be a 3-point perspective, since the vertical lines are not actually vertical, so I will see how to adjust my drawing accordingly. I decided to draw it in a 2-point perspective instead to make things a bit easier. As I draw this object, I'm observing the reference closely, making sure all the adjacent lines are parallel to each other so there is no weird distortions, no weird angles, and so on. Also, I'm drawing very lightly here, with thin lines, so I can adjust any part I want later on, or during the drawing. Once I get the major shape done, which is basically a box with a little boolean in the back, I can now move on to the interior details like the screen. Again, make sure all the lines are parallel to each other in the same angle, especially in the closed spaces. adding more details to the machine at the bottom with more simple boxes attached to it here and there, with smooth angles and chamfered edges. I can tell that my machine is a bit shorter, but it's okay, we can adjust the height later on. To get to the other side of the machine on the same level, I can draw the parallel line to the other side so I can get the angle correctly, copied to the other side. Adding the smaller details now like the decals and other textures. Now it's almost done. Let's add some line weight variety here, something we're gonna talk about very soon. And there it is, this is the final drawing done. I adjust the width a little bit and add the final values just for presentation's sake. You can get very close using the freehand method to draw the final form, because it was done with a technical drawing experience in the back of my head as I'm drawing it. So it's not done with random lines, but with correct guesses and mental calculations. This is basically the end point of drawing in perspective and all the exercises we have been doing from the start. All that was to do it in freehand using educated guesses and getting the result fast, correct, sharp, and almost perfect, without drawing any perspective lines except in the sketching part. And here it is, all done. And here are all three examples side by side. So with that said, what we will do in the next lesson is basically a combination between the earlier video I made in the beginner series, which was about how to draw anything using basic shapes, and drawing things in perspective using the freehand method. This will be like the universal way to simplify any object into simple shapes and in a correct perspective. This step is very tricky for beginners. It was very tricky for me, to be honest. I just couldn't tell where to cut objects, how to draw them, what shapes should I use, and how to mix them all together. So we will do that for simple objects like we did in the early video, but now with all the knowledge we had in perspective. We will go from simple objects to complex kitchen gadgets to a whole still life image and more. It will be a very important and interesting couple of lessons. Because things are getting more and more advanced as we move on, make sure you have done all the exercises you need before you move on to the next lesson. As I mentioned before, every lesson depends on the previous ones before it, so make sure you take it easy and very slow if you want. No need to rush in before you are 100% confident that you got all the info. Practice on your own first before moving on. Final note here is that we are not learning all this to be able to copy a reference in perspective 100%. That is not my goal here. My goal is to be able to do all that at first, then move on to changing the perspective from the reference photo to a new perspective you decide, which we will do in chapter 2. To finally, in chapter 3, we use the reference photo only as information to create your own new design from it, and from many reference photos at the same time. So you are building up the skill to create, not to copy. Something that will be much more clearer as we add more and more lessons to this series. But more on that later. As always, if you like this lesson, feel free to leave a like. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer them as soon as possible. To stay notified for future lessons, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.